welcome back to the Suitcase Settlement series. My name is Beth Ward and I head up the partnerships here at Skybound Wealth Management. Now today we're tackling one of the emotionally charged topics for expats, and that is property. So should you buy where you live, back home, or rent instead? We are here today to cut through that hype. We're talking real numbers, real risks, and what smart property strategy actually looks like for expats. So we'll explore why buying in the UAE isn't always liquid, and why UK property isn't always safe, and why mortgages, especially cross-border ones, can turn into traps if you don't fully understand the terms. And most importantly, does buying property really move you forward, or are you just locking yourself in? Now today I'm joined by Tom Pewtress, Global Head of Proposition here at Skybound Wealth Management. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
Good, thank you. Now, Tom, before we kick off, can you give us a brief overview of who Skybound are and your role here?
Sure. So Skybound Wealth Management are a cross-border financial planning firm assisting expats all over the world. My role as Global Head of Proposition is to ensure that our clients and advisors have access to ultimately the best quality of proposition, product solutions, whatever it may be, in order to move their financial plan forwards.
So Tom, let's talk about property.
Sure.
And why do expats sometimes feel pushed to buy and make that decision?
Yeah, look, I think property it's a very emotional thing, right? Certainly coming from the UK, we were always taught, go to work, buy a house. It's always kind of one of the first big financial steps that you make as an individual growing up. I think whether you're an expat or not, it's always a target or a goal of somebody in life. I think when you move overseas, it can be a sense of achievement. You know, you're able to potentially accelerate buying that property early on in your career as a result of taking a job overseas that may have greater benefit. But like I said, it's always an emotional thing. It's always, people are driven to buy property because of that ability to own a home, be proud of where they live, paint the four walls, change the colour of the door, have the curtains, etc. So I think it's a natural ingrained pressure for most people growing up. And then when you come overseas as well, other things like, where are you buying? Are you buying now where you live as an expat, or are you thinking about buying where you're going to be in the future or where you've come from? And they're all considerations to take upon and thoughts that go through most people's mind at that point,
So let's really dive in and start talking about UAE property. What are the pros, the cons, the red flags to kind of be aware of?
Yeah, UAE property has certainly seen an enormous jump in the last couple of years in terms of popularity. And it's become very popular with people moving here, right? Lots of hype, lots of conversations, a lovely destination to live in today. But there are pros, cons, and pitfalls to the whole process. So it's a beautiful place to live, and people want to secure their roots here more than ever. I think people are coming here and living here longer than previously. Previously, it was very transitional, and I don't think many people were buying in the region as a result of not knowing how long they would be here for. The UAE has made tremendous steps in encouraging people to stay for longer, and therefore people's vision of coming to the UAE has extended, and therefore people are committed to laying down more roots here. I think the cons, though, again, like any property market, this isn't just a UAE property market, but any property market does suffer with developer risk, projects not being completed, the cost of financing a project, the potential cost of getting into a project and not knowing what those costs are, whether it be broker fees, whether it be mortgage fees, or just the requirement for really potentially high deposits in comparison to where they've come from.
So I think it's really important in comparison now to talk about UK property. Is it still smart to buy there? Is it still safe to buy within the UK?
Yeah, so UK property has always been very popular, especially with overseas investors. And that's really driven by the supply and demand in the UK. There is a massive undersupply of UK property. There are more people looking for homes than there are homes available. So you've got that natural price increase always coming. But again, you have to be aware, are you buying in the right area? Is this an area where people are looking to purchase property and settle down? Are you buying from a reputable developer? Again, like I said, with UAE property, you've always got developer risk. Is the property going to complete? And then again, similar story, what are the transaction costs? As overseas residents, as an example, from the latest budget, there's now an additional taxation to buy UK property. Do people know that? And sometimes I think those transaction costs, people are not aware coming into that conversation.
So moving on to mortgages, and especially mortgages abroad, what don't they really tell you?
Yeah, so everyone thinks of a mortgage as if they were back home, right? And being able to access the financial markets in the same way. That's not always true because your circumstances are vastly different. And as a result of you being overseas, banks are going to naturally assume that they're going to carry more risk with you because you're overseas, right? They don't necessarily know as much about you. So typically with UK mortgages, you're probably looking at higher interest rates, a higher requirement for deposits. Compared to somebody in the UK today who might need a 5 or 10% deposit, you're probably looking at 25, 30, 35% as a deposit for purchasing property. So again, these are some of the issues that you face when obtaining a mortgage and coming to the table and not being in that position to satisfy that requirement.
So when we're thinking about clients or expats that are moving abroad and they might now rent out their property within the UK, they now become a landlord.
Yeah.
What are some of those steps that they need to take to ensure that there's a smooth transition?
I think this, Beth, is probably one of the biggest areas people make lots of mistakes in. And just because they don't know, right? So sometimes when you leave your home, you move overseas, you get a tenant, and all of a sudden you're now this landlord by default kind of factor. There are things that you need to consider. Things like your mortgage. Is your mortgage a residential mortgage or is it a buy-to-let mortgage? Because if you have a residential mortgage, you might be breaking the terms and conditions of that mortgage by letting that property out, okay? So again, you should really speak to the bank about that and look at whether or not it's viable to rent out the property in the first place. Things like landlord insurance, people miss that type of stuff all the time. Simple stuff that, again, I've just put a tenant in there, I'll forget about it and I'll move on. Understanding regulation, okay? Regulation is both good and bad as long as good if you know it, bad if you don't, right? And there is a lot of changes in certainly places like UK regulation today that is impacting landlords and whether or not, what rights they have as a landlord, what rights tenants have, etc. So these are really three key things in my opinion, mortgages, the ability to let the property, whether it be, the building if you own an apartment as an example. If you're looking at short-term rents as an example, that might not be permitted in that facility and you might not be able to do it at all. So you just need to know what you are getting into and they are really key areas. So mortgages, the ability to rent the property, landlord insurance as an example, and then the regulation that sits around you as a landlord.
So when expats get to the UAE, how do they weigh up whether it's best to buy or to rent here?
Yeah, good question. And I think people are often quite keen to jump into buying. Just because sometimes of that dead money mentality around renting. I think the decision process that you need to look at as an expat coming to the UAE is, one, how long are you going to be here? Buying a property can be quite costly in terms of the transaction costs, broker fees, mortgage fees, etc. So getting into property requires an element of investment, and therefore it's probably always advisable to hold that for a much longer period of time. Whereas an expat coming here on a short-term contract, for example, maybe a 2-year contract, maybe renting provides them with that greater flexibility to be here for that 2 years, earn that money, experience the lifestyle, and then move on to whatever contract they might have next. So renting certainly provides people with a lot of flexibility, and some people like that flexibility because it allows them to move from house to house, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, or even just within the UAE to experience different parts of the UAE. You might want to live in an apartment in downtown and experience the vibrance of downtown, and then a few years later enjoy the quiet tranquility of a villa outside of the main city. So I think the decision process is very much around, again, time horizon, your flexibility, your ability to move around freely, the transaction cost of getting in there, and can you afford to buy property at this point in time? Or from a financial planning point of view, does that put too much of a financial burden and strain on your own circumstance right now?
So when would property not be the right move to invest in?
Yeah, I think there's lots of factors on that, Beth, and that might be based upon, are you buying somewhere for yourself? And again, like I spoke about a second ago, having the flexibility of being able to move on from that property. I think really it's not the right move if you are staying somewhere for a short period of time. I don't think it's the right move if you're uncertain about a developer or the developer can't provide you with the assurances that you need. I think you need to do your due diligence on property. It might not be the right move for the purposes of looking at your overall asset class and your overall net worth. If you've already got a significant property portfolio, are you continuing to add to it because you like it and it's all that you know, or are you better off taking some advice and investing elsewhere? So there's multiple factors. It might be a tax reason. You might have already built a portfolio up that's generating a significant amount of income already, and therefore a significant amount of tax through that process. And there may be better ways of diversifying your net worth as a result of it. So multiple factors, multiple things to look at, lots of different reasons. But those are just some of them today.
So when would be a good time to invest into property?
Yeah, so I think a good time to invest in property is once you've done your due diligence. And whether you're buying to invest in a property or you're buying for the emotional want of a home, due diligence on both parts is key, right? So I think once you understand things like tax, transaction costs, your requirements financially, now you're into a conversation of this is a good time to buy for me because it's right for my financial plan. I think when we're looking at investments as an example, going through that due diligence process, making sure that you're working with somebody who's reputable and can give you the right information to make sure that from a numbers perspective is going to add up in the future and it's going to create a good long-term outcome for you. And then from a home perspective, again, all the things we've spoken about today, is it the right time for me? Am I going to be in this house for a significant period of time? Does it create that home environment that I'm looking for, I'm seeking for right now? Those two things right there would be a good time to invest.
So let's talk about what a balanced property strategy does look like.
Yeah, so a balanced property strategy for me is not being overweight property. I mean, lots of people have got lots of property, but may not have investments and pensions to complement it. So balance is balance, right? Everything in moderation. When we're looking at property itself, you don't necessarily need property in every country you live in or you've lived in. It's about understanding where the right property is for the purposes of investing. So is the UAE the right place to invest right now? That's always a really tough question. No one here really knows the state of the market, I don't think. Some people asked today, are we at the peak of the market or is it going to continue to go up? So again, it's about going back to those questions we've addressed today, which is it the right time, etc. Making sure that it's right for you and trying to take into consideration some of those surrounding factors. Same with the UK, right? Again, looking at the due diligence, looking at the numbers. The UK certainly has a supply and demand issue, which stacks up always from an investment perspective. Can the same be said about the UAE? They're factors that you need to consider when you're building that balanced portfolio of properties. And lastly, I'd always say from a balanced perspective, what are you trying to achieve with property? Are you trying to achieve long-term growth? Are you trying to achieve capital appreciation? Are you trying to achieve income? And the purposes of balancing your portfolio to meet that goal, really, really important.
So how can Skybound support expats with making these decisions, especially around property?
Yeah, so Skybound as financial planners are here to help clients really ask the questions they don't know to ask, find the answers that they probably would have never got to, and allow clients to make educated financial decisions. As our kind of unique selling point, we're a cross-border wealth firm, and the cross-border element of property is really, really challenging. So again, our job is to work through those questions with clients, go away, help find that information that they wouldn't necessarily have got to or by themselves, and allow them to make that decision on whether you're buying a home, somewhere to live, or be able to make a property an investment as an alternative asset class to complement pensions, to complement investments, and really map all those things together. And like I said, the cross-border piece being a significant part of it, you might have different accounts in different countries, different bank accounts in different countries, and now you're looking at different properties in different countries, pulling all of that together under one roof with a financial planner that can assist you in all those different areas, add lots of value throughout that course, whether it be on mortgages, the right property to buy, where to buy, etc., etc. I think that's how we add the best amount of value to our clients.
So Tom, as we start to wrap up, what one final piece of advice would you give to those who are watching today?
Yeah, I think just asking for help sometimes is a great start, and always my piece of advice to anybody, just to be able to make those educated decisions and go into the process with the full knowledge. I think certainly for property, one of the big cons or one of the big red flags is you end up doing something you don't know all the answers to and you weren't aware. And my biggest frustration sometimes is when that pressure is then put on the individual and it might not have been the right time. So go through that questions, go through those answers, make sure you're making an educated decision and do it with the help of somebody that can act as a kind of third party outside the household, sounding board, to be your coach, your mentor, someone that you turn to ask those questions to.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Tom. We really appreciate it. And thank you those who were watching. If you would like to know any more information, please do book a consultation with us. We would love to help you out, and we'll see you next time.